Hello, everybody. This is the Chocolate News Podcast, and I'm your host, Andria Carter. My co host, John Reese, is on vacation this week, but he will return next week. If you don't know, the Cincinnati Herald has been around since 1955 and is the leading African American owned newspaper in the greater Cincinnati area and northern Kentucky. Today, we have our special guest, Lesley Jones, who is the organizing director for the AMOS Project and pastor of Truth and Destiny Church. Thank you for being here, Lesley.
Great. Great for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. So before we get started talking real quick, I'm just going to cover a little bit of the chocolate news that's been happening this week. It's kind of like I'm going to go through it really, really quick, but it's been an interesting. We've lost another youth football coach. Nancy Pelosi's husband's been attacked. We've lost a rapper, which is unfortunate, all to violence. And then, unfortunately, the Bengals and MLB. So, real quick, I'm going to start this off. I'm hate to say it, but on Sunday, Cincinnati lost another youth football coach to violence. He was critically shot Sunday morning in the 800 block of Hutchinson Avenue. This is the second youth football coach who has been shot in less than 2 weeks, unfortunately. Why he was shot, we don't know. What is going on, we don't know. But police are investigating and trying to find out what's going on with this case. I'm just sorry to see a young man who was a mentor to young football, trying to shape minds and lead young people on the field, has been taken away from us. It's just sad. It's just really, really sad.
Andrea, it really is. And I think that we have to look at the fact that people it's a senseless act of violence, no matter when, what you're taking a life, when you take a life and you pick up a gun, that's just senseless. But there is something, that's happening around just no regard, no regard. There used to be some regard for young people, for older people, and certain things just didn't make their way. And we don't know all the circumstances around these shootings, but to bring violence to an area where there are children, period, and perpetrate those kinds of crimes on people who are trying to make a positive impact on their lives to me is not just, it's heartbreaking. I wrote a post this week and simply said, I couldn't say speechless. I said wordless. I had no word for that act and that action of what happened. It just left me without words to even be able to speak and really, gather my thoughts around that. But it's certainly a time where we need to wake up, and we definitely need to do something about getting these guns out of the hands of dangerous people, period.
Yes, definitely. And that being said, the follow of that, we also lost Takeoff, who was a member of the Migos group. And he was shot dead in Houston over the weekend as well, which is another shame. I think he's like the second or third rapper within a few days that has lost his life to gun violence,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is just it's sad. It's just so sad that this is happening.
Again, people without the ability, I think coping skills, the ability, something about a gun gives people this false sense of security, a false sense of power, right? And so a person wielding a gun and willing to pull out a gun and shoot someone has this false sense that they are in so much, they have power. And a lot of times we got people out here shooting, and they're shooting folks, and they're just shooting. They're not even necessarily aiming at somebody particularly, or was that really an intended target? And in the case of Takeoff, what I've learned about him, is that he was a pretty good guy. He was pretty good, kind of kept to himself and quiet kind of guy. He wasn't this guy who was out here being that hardcore gangster rapper, so to speak. And so what was all of this about? I don't know, but what I know about the violence that's being perpetrated and the folks that are probably creating this violence is that there's some great lacking in them. And a lot of that is coping skills, how to cope, how to deal, with an issue. without picking up this gun that makes you think you have this enormous amount of power over someone and take their life. And then now it's not just that person's life, but his family, his friends, the shooter is impacted. I am a firm believer that when someone pulls the trigger on a gun, I don't care how hardcore they think they are, taking somebody's life bothers you for the rest of your life.
Oh
And so
yeah.
I don't think that those people even have peace after they commit these kinds of heinous acts, for real.
No, I
Yeah.
think I think what's sad is that we're not teaching, conflict resolution. Trying to quote resolving that way. As a when I was a police reporter, I saw too many times people being killed over items, over dumb stuff.
Hmm.
I was like, at least have a purpose when you pull that trigger. I mean, deer hunting is a purpose. It's a sport. You understand why they're using that rifle or gun to shoot something because they're doing a specific sport. This is not. It's I don't understand it. I don't get it, and I think it's just sad, but it's unfortunate. But also, I'm going to move on real quick. One, the Bengals lost to the Browns. Enough said about the Bengals lost to the Browns. That's all I can say. Um,
Yeah,
it
disappointing. But what I don't get is, someone kept saying to me, "But it's a rivalry. It's a rivalry." I'm like, "It's a great rivalry," but for us to, allow the Browns to come up here to Cincinnati on prime time,
I
yeah,
know.
I was quite disappointed, but I still got faith. I still got my faith,
Oh well, I
that
think
we gonna pull it out on Sunday.
yeah, I think we will. I mean, it's again, I whenever the Bengals play Monday night, they have that curse of never winning on Monday night. They never do. It is so rare for them to win. Last year they won on Monday Night
Mm-hmm.
Football.
Yep.
I was amazed. I was like, is this a fluke? Oh my God. So again, it's just go with the flow. So there's that. And so last but not least, to get us into the beginning of our discussion for tonight, one I'm going to mention, it's sad to see that we're getting ready to go into a World Series and there is no American Black players on any of the baseball teams involved in the World Series.
About the last 5 years or so, there has been, a push particularly in inner cities. They've been trying to, revive Little League baseball, but we simply aren't also producing them out of high schools, colleges. But I look at, like, younger kids, today are not as engaged in baseball as they were then. And so, but I do think it's a travesty that we don't have any Black players, in the World Series, and that they're just not in the league even. And so that's something we really need to look at. Why? I think it's because even at younger ages, like I said, we're just not fostering that game in our community.
No, because I think that we have relied too much on what game can give us a future money
Right.
monetarily, which is basketball or football. And I think really truly we should be looking at teaching our young people alternative sports or even some of the old more field-esque sports like rugby and field hockey and some other like hacky sack or just all those alternative sports because there's more ways of making money and making living, not just football or basketball. And I think we got looped into this box sports wise, and we got stuck. And we're not encouraging our young people to expose them to other sports that their skill set might start out with basketball or football. But you know what? Rugby is football too, but only in a different way. Soccer uses running in a different way. Field hockey is with a stick and a mask throwing a ball in a unique way. It's not golf, but they still use the same type of ball almost in field hockey.
Well, the truth is, a lot of people don't know the truth, right?
That's true.
So, I actually was looking up some stats around that, and baseball is actually the number two highest paid sport in the United States. So, after basketball, right?
Wow.
And when, right, in 2014, the average salary of a baseball player was $8.82 million. Baseball
Mm,
players get paid. And we have to look at the injury factor of a baseball, and the longevity and lifespan of a baseball player is far exceeds that of, a football player.
that
Of
is true.
and the injury, yeah, you can get injured in any sport, but very rarely are you finding baseball players with concussions. You get jam fingers, broken fingers, wear out your knees, things like that. But
Hmm.
you don't find too many life altering injuries in baseball. And, yeah, the thing is, I mean, it's a hard season. You play over 100 games, but you're making big money. And I think that, people, the popular sport is basketball, football, but that is not the highest paying.
No. So I
So,
think it's interesting to see how we're going to encourage a change in our community. But and speaking of change, I'm going to end with Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked in his home, suffered an injury, had operation on his skull. He is recovering, but the rhetoric surrounding his injuries has ramped up by the right like you've never seen before. And as we go into the final week of the midterm elections, the campaign season of the midterm elections, you're starting to see this rhetoric, this violence, the intimidation. Now you're
mhm,
starting to see the articles of where, people are not supporting the Dems, or the suburban women are supporting the Republicans. And, all the stories favor the Republicans where they weren't favoring them a couple of days ago.
mhm.
And it's all about that campaign to turn people's thoughts that, well, everyone's voting Republican anyway, so just go ahead and do it. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's probably true or probably not true. They're still hoping for this red wave that's
Mhm.
going to happen. What do you think? What are you seeing in these final days?
So, first, I certainly lifted up prayers for the Pelosi family, for Paul and for Nancy, because one thing we must recognize that, violence perpetrated on, candidates and elected officials and different people is not new. I mean, as far back as, the late 1700s, 1800s, I mean, there was some heinous things happening to elected officials. When we think about, Abraham Lincoln, and I just lift him up because he's one of the, most famous assassinations,
Yes.
persons being assassinated. But what people need to really know, and what people may not know, is that the final, that assassination was not the first attempt. Was not the first threat. There, he was being threatened, and most of all, he was threatened just for running. But then once he wins, and then there was a lot of threats around the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address, because it was very obvious he was leaning in a direction that many folks did not want him to lean. And so that was not the first attempt on his life. It was the final one, but it was not the first one. And so historically, we have seen these attacks get more and more heinous. Insurrection that we saw in January was not the first time there'd been an insurrection. After Reconstruction, folks was burning down, Capitol
Yes.
buildings, and so, Brother Roland Martin says it well in the title of his book, White Fear, and talking about that. And when that fear rises up, people will, do things that are ridiculous. My father taught me that, the worst person to fight is a scared person, because he used to always say to me, a scared person can kill you, even though they don't maybe intend to, but because they're scared, they can kill you, like for real. So you need to, right, think about what scared people are doing. So scared people come up with conspiracy theories. Scared people come up with things to scare other people, because they fear losing their position and their power. And so when we look at, the landscape of politics, and particularly the midterm elections, midterms are all about setting the stage for presidential elections, period. That's one of the purposes, I think of midterms, and definitely what it does. But we oftentimes don't pay attention to it is midterms is where is really all about local and state politics. And you're really electing those people to go and represent you on the national scene and to work with the president. So what I'm seeing is a lot of rhetoric coming out on extremist ends that's trying to stir up fear. And that fear is because there are people who fear losing their control, and they want that control and that stronghold. And the only way they know how to perhaps feel good about themselves or feel empowered is when they can press somebody else down or oppress somebody. So this election cycle is really about fighting for democracy, because democracy connects to freedom. And if we continue to watch what we're watching and hearing the things that I've been hearing, of course they want, right now I think the polls, I don't necessarily listen to polls ever. I know that they're necessary for pundits. They're necessary for us to have political talk, right?
Yes.
But how accurate, I don't know, because the polls in 2016 blew them away. They were wrong. 2020, they were wrong. And people lie. Polls are the, responses of people. I've been voting since I was 18, and that is well over 30 years. I have never been polled. I don't think, right?
Right.
So
Well,
I've
I
never
mean,
been polled. I've never
I've
been
gotten.
called. I got one, I think I got one poll in the mail, mailed it back, but I haven't really ever been polled. But, I've never even been called for jury duty. So, and things like that. But the thing that I'm getting at is people lie, on the polls. And so when I look at the landscape of where things are right now, I think that the frightening thing they want us to think is that, yes, there's going to be a red wave and there's nothing we can do about it. And that red wave is going to be made up of people who are rejecting everything rational, anything progressive, anything, they're going to reject the right of women over their bodies. They're going to reject, voting rights. They're rejecting all. So the people, and that's why they're going to vote Republican, because the biggest issue is the economy. I simply don't believe that.
I think it's one of the issues.
Right.
I mean, the articles that I saw. Well, first article I saw was on that blacks are so fed up with Democrats that they're slowly pulling away from the party because they haven't done what they promised to do over the decades. Biden's not paying attention. Some other things are not paying attention. And, they even tried quoting Al Sharpton in a couple articles. That was the first article. Then the article that came out today are that the suburban white women are all leaning Republican. And that's the group that the Republicans are hoping to deliver them to the promised land of the midterm elections. But what's interesting is that there were a number of polling and articles early on saying that suburban white women are not favoring Republicans because of the Roe v. Wade issue. Though now they're saying that the anger is gone. I was like, no, the anger is not gone. It's just tempered. And I think where there was going to be this wave, and then they're claiming, oh no, there's going to be a blue wave. No, I don't think there's going to be a blue wave. I think what's going to happen is that I think the Dems will barely hold the House, get a further foothold in the Senate, because the Republicans are continuing to do certain things because they continue to stop, fear, other things, but they're not governing. And right now, the Democrats are the only ones governing.
Yes.
And even on a local level, I think we're seeing a little bit more governing from both sides of the aisle, but we're also seeing a little bit more of that national rhetoric from certain key people, from certain key people, and even some of the politicians. They're quoting that crap. But I also think that because of the redistricting of spots, some people are a little bit more in a desperate situation than others.
Yeah, I think definitely here in Ohio, the redistricting issue is big. And I think we are hearing, as you said, that rhetoric that gets repeated, and definitely we hear that coming out of the state house a lot. And even as we see the bills that are going to be coming up after this election. So that's why it's so important for us to pay attention to who's running and what they're saying. And we see that there's been a lot of national money spent in Ohio to try to, and on both sides, both
Yes.
sides. You got one spewing the rhetoric, one trying to counteract it. And I mean, $9 million is a lot of money. Just to drop on a few, ads to get that out there. And so like you said, I think that people are going to be looking at who's governing. And I think that when it comes to the key issues, what I'm hearing, yeah, that on the red side, folks are saying it's the economy. Maybe on the blue side, it's the abortion issue. But honestly, I think that many people are also tired of the rhetoric and
Mm-hmm.
want to look to those who are governing, those who are more centrist, who, can just restore us. Ultimately, people want to just kind of live, and they don't want to live in the midst of the chaos, the madness, and the rhetoric. But people are also don't want to live in communities where they don't know who their enemy is anymore, right?
Yes.
They don't know, and they don't know. And so people are, and I think that's on both sides. I think that people are starting to look, and they're suspect and questioning everybody. And so how do I get any order restored? I got to look at what's happening. And I do think that the Democrats are governing well right now, in a lot of places, locally, and nationally, and are bringing, I think that the whole January 6th committee, and the way in which it was led, and the things that happened, whether people agree or disagree, I think the one thing people agree on was the committee was ran pretty well. And
Yes.
and that's what they want to see. Like, hey, they went on with the business. We didn't have to hear a bunch of, mass. And when they did not think, I think that they got mass respect when they didn't publicize and showcase every testimony, right? So there was some testimonies people were like, I'm tired of this and I want to hear this, right? So they're like, no, we don't need to air that, but we do need to air this. And we do need to bring this to the people so that people can hear it, see it, whatever. And so I think that they were transparent enough, but they also guided the process enough. And I think people are looking, gonna use that and look at that and see how, who's gonna be on that wave. But we also have to know that these races, midterms, we oftentimes have low turnout, and we've seen a little uptick in the turnout this year, at least in early voting.
Yes.
So that gives me some hope that hey, people are getting out there and voting, and right now, I think that on the things that could happen, in Georgia, the things that could happen in Pennsylvania, and even right here in Ohio, with particularly our congressional races, it could, see I would say a purple wave.
Well, I think in Hamilton County, as of today, the totals for as of today, over 19,000 people have voted in early voting in Hamilton County. Over 10,000 people have voted or Democrat. 3,500 have been Republican, and then
Mm,
but the non-party voter, the independent, close to 5,500 people have not chosen either one and voted as an independent, which is
okay.
interesting. You don't know which way they've gone. And you don't even know which way the Dems have gone, who they're voting for, whether they're just doing the straight party ticket or they're piecemealing. Because there's some that you vote for, there's some you don't. because it's also boots on the ground. Who do you know? Who you don't know? And I think this telling of what's happening locally on the ground, everyone's very involved, very invested on what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. But I think the Democrats are not going to vote against their interests.
Interest.
And I think that's a lesson a lot of Republicans still vote party instead of who's going to benefit your bottom line. I'm looking at taxes. I'm looking at the legislation that's coming through that's affecting how I'm able to, what am I going to be able to write off? What am I able to deduct on my taxes? Is it going to benefit me from if I go to buy a house next year? Is that going to benefit me on my taxes next year? Is that going
Mm-hmm.
to benefit me if I go back to school and write that off? Or is that gone? Because locally, what are the taxes locally? And will I be able to afford that? Will I be able to afford, everything that goes involved? I'm going to be a first time home buyer. I'm going into my city. Well, I'm not going to go there. I'm I'm a late bloomer coming to own property, having
Mm-hmm.
gone through and helped my mother handle her house, handled her estate, and I've learned. My mother taught me a lot on how to handle a household,
Mm-hmm.
not just inside but outside, and the emergencies. Who do you call? Who do you know? Who do you keep on retainer? Who do you respect? Who do you go to? Some people are not exposed to that. My sister and I, we've been very lucky. And I take that the same way to politics. Who serves me? Who do I see in my community? Who do I see as a distant billboard compared to being in the community where I can go and talk to them? Or I've been to an event and reached out and said, hey, by the way, I like how you handle yourself. And I would just say, what do you see come election night next week, November 8th? Who do you think is going to win? Who's going to lose? Or is it going to be a draw?
I think that they're going to be very close races. I think they're going to be very close races. And I believe that our congressional races, particularly, are going to be, I think that it's going to be very close between Ryan and Vance.
Yes.
And I think, but I do think Ryan's going to eke it out. I mean, really, really close. I think that Shabbat and Landsman, I think it's going to be a Shabbat victory again. I don't want that, but that's what I think it's going to be. I believe that, we're going to kind of see the same players go to the state house that are there. So I think those folks will win their races. I believe it's going to be a very close. I believe that one of the one of the Ohio Supreme Court justices is going to turn over. My hope is that they all three would turn, but I think that those are going to be close. I think some of these commercials have been very damaging, but and I don't hear these candidates clapping back the way I think they really need to clap back.
That's a lost art too, especially
Yeah.
on the political plane. People have gotten too used to having other people clap back for them. But
Hmm.
I mean, you got to prove yourself. We live in an on-demand world. You got to respond on demand as well.
Hmm.
So, but that being said, I will end it here. You'll have to come back so we
Oh,
can do
definitely.
a recap of what happens next week. So we'll have to do that because Joe Biden, as we've been talking, Joe Biden was giving an unexpected speech on democracy, what's at stake.
Hmm.
And when I said who's going to win or lose, is democracy going to win? Or are we going to lose?
Yeah, I believe that I'm saying democracy is going to win. I think it's going to, I think the democracy is going to win. But I believe that there's going to be some significant losses that is going to make it hard.
Well, from that, I will end there and I will just say um, thank you for being here with me, Lesley Jones. People, if you're interested in the AMOS project, please check them out. You have a website.
Yeah, they can go to www.amos.org and check us out there. And we're gonna be at the polls on Sunday. Souls to the polls.
Oh, okay.
And so we're gonna be at the Board of Elections, Hamilton County, Montgomery County, and Franklin County on this Sunday, November 6th, from 1 to 5. The polls are open, so people need to get out to vote. And we're gonna have a praise party at the polls. We got it all:
Oh,
music
I
and
might if I don't.
uplifting, food, everything.
Oh, well, shoot, I might wait and do it Sunday and join you all at the stroll for the. I might do that. Well, thank you again. I would thank everyone today. If you have any comments about today's discussion or about the election after, please let us know. For more information about today's topic and the past podcast episodes, just go to the www.thecincinnatiherald.com, the session newsletter, or on our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Make sure to subscribe to our podcasts on your favorite podcast app. I'm Andria Carter. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a great day.